engage the community, but how we figure out how to revitalize this city. We should make no small plan. We should make no small plan. And so at that, I think I've spoken for a little minute here, and I know we have about 2 hours, right? Is that what the session calls for? I'm really hopeful to get, and I know there was a list of questions, and I'm hoping to elicit a lot of yours during this next Q&A period. So I could drone on, but who wants to start? Anybody? Yes, please. Should I give her the microphone and then she could carry it around? Yeah, sure. Okay, I'll do that. Mm-hmm. Yes, so the question is there an emphasis on foot patrol, and what is, if I'm hearing you right, I'm paraphrasing, what's the plan for continuing or promoting foot patrol in the police force? We're about right? In the neighborhoods. So let me say this by way of general philosophy about how I feel about foot patrols. There are about 3,000 men and women in a police department, 8th largest police department in the country. If I could, tomorrow I'd give away or sell on eBay every police car that we own. I'd get rid of all of them. The difficulty with that strategy is that we handle around 1.5 million calls for service. 1.5. Anybody want to guess what the the overwhelming majority of those calls for service are? Guess. No? Somebody had said it earlier in their thoughts about what the concerns were. Not robberies. Drugs. Drugs. It's just, it will wear you out. It's just it's like so crazy that people talk about drugs, and you'll answer these questions about drugs, and then they'll wake up the person sitting next to them and say, ask him about drugs. And so I'm weary of drugs, mostly because most of the awards and recognition I've gotten in the police department have been in the drug war. And so I probably know the most about the fight on drugs. And we've been waging it in this country against the people we serve for now 3 decades to little progress. And we find ourselves, and it's contributed to this philosophy of rapid movement of police resources to call with very little manpower to utilize. So it really does come down to a logistical equation about how you could deliver services rapidly. If we could figure out a way to get people just to not accept it, not call time out, but we could get people to think about different strategies around this drug issue, I think the foot patrol, my idea about selling all the cars, is much more doable. Because then you could have police officers. What he didn't mention is that I have a little bit of like family history to kind of reflect on this. My great-grandfather was a police officer, 2 sons, both city police officers, one killed in the line of duty not far from here. And the other, my grandfather, walked a foot post his entire career. I don't think he ever drove a police car. I know my great-grandfather never drove a police car, and his other son, my great-uncle, never drove a police car. And walked a foot post on Greenmount Avenue. He knew everybody there. I think, imagine that if you could deploy officers in neighborhoods, what the impact might really be to drug use and open-air drug dealing if we could have officers there that knew people and really problem solve. The difficulty is I just can't get people to knock off all the calling. I just can't get them to do that. It's going to take a while to do it in increments. So one of the things we do now is when the officers graduate, we place them in a special unit and they walk foot for several months by themselves. And we're trying to encourage them the same way Detective Sullivan and I started our careers. We became skillful at talking to people because we didn't have 4 big, strong guys backing us up all with tasers aimed at people, and that's how we resolve conflict. We were out on the street, and we had to rely on the community to back us up, so we didn't cheese them off. We made sure their cars were still there when they woke up, and we were respectful, and they were respectful to us, and we looked out for each other. And we didn't solve world hunger there, but we had a relationship, and we got things done. I didn't have so much a relationship with Herbs because they kept cashing bad checks, but I very much would want to get to that model. I think that's the surest way to break down the barriers and trust and remove this difference between perception and reality. We will lower people's apprehensions and fear of crime if they develop a personal relationship with the police that serve them. I'm absolutely convinced of it. But again, it's got to be in the doing of it. Very, very hard to convince these rank and file who have spent decades of their career thinking that the best way to solve the violent crime fight in Baltimore, or the violence in Baltimore, is to incarcerate a lot of young black men. And it's a challenge to lead away from that philosophy to a philosophy of targeting the most violent offenders, bad guys with guns, the things you hear me talk about over and over again. Here's another factual thing I'll throw out to you. 2005, the city police department set a record. I think it'll stand up in the history of the country for a very long time, 2005. Anyone know what it is? No, 2005. No ACLU to NAACP members here? If you're from the ACLU, it's okay. 2005 record, 108,000 adult arrests on a population of what? What's the population of Baltimore? 660. 660, 665, 670, depending on who you ask, right? 108,000 arrests, adult arrests, in a single year. 269 murders. 269 murders in Baltimore. The last year, lowest homicide rate in 27 years, 223 homicides, and we made fewer than 55,000 arrests. 269, 108,000. 55,000, a little less, 55,000, 223. I think I disproved that. And this year, we will be lower than last year. We will be lower than last year. And I know that's not a jinx job. I gave up the rabbit's foot. We'll be lower, and we won't make 45,000 arrests this year. Last year, the juveniles, 30-year low in juvenile homicides, and we did it by making 1,000 fewer juvenile arrests than the year before. I think I've disproved this theory about if you only arrest more, you'll drive the violence down. I think I debunked that theory. Now I just have to convince the cops to get out of the car and actually drink water from the people they serve. That remains a challenge. Who else? You have a question? Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
So how, I know you have the anonymous call lines now so people can be identified. How would you increase this relationship when the people are scared to use the call?
Yeah, so the question is, the community concerns about cooperation